Hey Newlife Youth, recently we heard from James Bartle, founder of Outland denim, someone who is super passionate about Jesus, super passionate about other human beings, and it was amazing. He provides us with insight into how we can make sure that we are not part of the problem in the slavery that is happening around the world at the moment. So make sure you give it a watch. It's going to be epic.
What I thought I'd do is I just asked Jim a couple of questions just to sort of set us up for the night. So you now are like the director and the founder of Outland Denim, this amazing company, but take it back a couple of years. What were you doing prior to that and how did it lead you to that?
Yeah, look, take it back, it's 10 years now. I was working as a freestyle motocross rider, going around the country doing shows for people, doing shows for youth groups like this, and telling people about my faith.
And so what changed then? So am I right in saying you were doing some pretty cool stuff overseas, doing some pretty big shows, and then was there moments that, I don't know, you just saw a problem and a need and you tried to fix it, or?
Look, there's a lot of moments traveling around and seeing, I guess, different cultures, and there's different cultures even within our own country. And so as you start to experience these different things, you see a lot of need. You know, there's need everywhere. It doesn't matter what corner of the globe you're in. There's always someone that is needing something. And I guess riding the bike gave me a lot of experience traveling around and seeing these things, and to always confronted with problems, challenges. I was also confronted with, at the time I was 28, when I was learning to, progress in my sport. I came from a racing background, and so I learnt to do freestyle motocross, which is a little bit different, late. And so I was always really scared when I was riding. I was, at 25, they say that fear starts to kick in, and it's a real thing, it does. And so I'm traveling the country, always scared and quite anxious. So it always had me on my knees, and I guess it was an experience at a show that led me to the next part of this journey, which is to start this company. And I was actually performing in Toowoomba at a festival called Easterfest, and it was a large music festival, and we were hired to be some entertainment out there and do a freestyle motocross show. And I knelt down and I was just, God, keep me safe today. I'm scared that I'm going to break my neck. And as I closed my eyes to pray, I got this picture of these three little Asian girls. And really, that was the very first, I guess, thing that led me to take some steps to see what this vision I got was all about.
Yeah, awesome. And so that picture that you got, were they like happy people in a really comfortable home in, the Gold Coast, or what kind of a picture did God drop on your heart?
These three little girls they weren't happy little girls. They were scared little girls. And I'd been to the movies a few years earlier with my wife to watch the Liam Neeson film Taken, which is a movie, if you haven't seen it, about the hero Liam Neeson's daughter and her friend being abducted and stolen when traveling through Europe. Now, it's a fictional film, but it really stirred me, and it meant that over these next couple of years, I started to learn a little bit about human trafficking. My wife's a journalist, and she'd give me this information. And, it really made me angry that something like this could exist in today's day and age. So when I saw this picture in my mind of these little girls, I was, I think, connected to that in some way. Later that day, I actually met somebody from Destiny Rescue. And, meeting them, they gave me this brochure. And on the front of this brochure was a picture of these three little girls. And so I was compelled to do something, and they offered me the opportunity to travel with them and see what they did in Southeast Asia. And so I think it was a month or two later, I jumped on an aeroplane and flew over to see this issue of human trafficking firsthand. And it was a trip that completely changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, wow. And so then talk to us about that. So you had your eyes open up, you were exposed to something horrific and very confronting in sex trafficking and human trafficking. And so then what changed when you came home after that?
Well, the big change actually happened on this trip. And, we landed in Thailand and traveled to Pattaya. And it's in that area where there's a famous street, which is famous for kids and adults being sold for their bodies. And as I walked through the area, it was was a bit heavy, and it wasn't obviously a happy place, but nobody seemed to be that scared or that intimidated. It didn't seem as bad as I imagined it would be. And I remember saying to the representative that had taken us to show us what was happening that I thought it would be worse. And he then took me further, and we walked away from where everything was into a darker area, and I saw this young girl for sale. And, it was a moment that completely changed my life. At the time I had nieces. I've now got daughters of my own. And, as I looked at this little girl, I could see how scared she was. And, we think she was only about 12 or 13 years old. And it appeared like it was the first night that she was out there on the street for sale. And when you see something like that, it's not like seeing it in the movies, and it's not like reading about it. It's so confronting, and everything in you wants to be the hero of the story and run over and kick the doors down and throw over your shoulder and run away and be the hero of the day. And as I asked the representative, what is going on and what are we going to do about it? He said, if you look around, you'll see that these little girls are everywhere. And that was a moment where I committed. I just said, no matter what, I want to be a part of a solution. It's so wrong that I can live in this country and enjoy the life that I'm enjoying whilst this little girl is sold for her body. Her life will be shorter. She's a slave. And it took us on a journey to learn more. And so I came back to Australia, and I was pretty motivated to do something and set up this little business that was really there to be able to make jeans. I had no idea how difficult that was going to be, but the concept was that we would employ people that needed another opportunity in their life to be able to come and get this kind of employment. And that's led us to where we are today, 10 years later.
Awesome. And so got so many questions to follow up from here. So you've started this company to try and help rescue girls. Have you seen moments, or what moments have you seen where you've heard a story of a girl's life being transformed because of the employment that she got? And I guess what's the fruit that you've seen from starting this company?
You go into something like this and you really don't know what you're doing. And I think that was a really big lesson in my life, was just acting and being obedient, regardless of not knowing what to do necessarily, what was the next step. I just knew that I had to do something. And for me, having a Christian faith, it really was clear to me that it was actually my responsibility, that actually the God, the creator of the universe, had ordained me, but not just me, actually every human being, you, to solve this problem. Those, the poor and those that are in need, is to love them and to offer them hope. And knowing that, and that being deeply rooted within me, I guess it was so clear that I couldn't turn my back on this anymore. My life was really about thinking about riding bikes, and it was I guess ultimately wanting to serve God in some kind of a way. But when I was made aware of this issue, it was clear that it was my responsibility to do something. And so the stories and the impact on the people took time. But I think one of the highlights of my life to date would be about 3 years into this journey, where we've been offering this employment and education and training and a safe place for people to work. And we were interviewing the very first girl that we employed, and just trying to work out, really, does this make a difference for you and your family or not? And she went on to say that it makes a huge difference because she'd been able to build a home for her family. And previously she was living under a plastic sheet, so a tarpaulin, and her parents and her siblings all lived just under one of those. And so it was a really tough, confronting life, for them, especially in monsoon season. It was really hard and in fact really dangerous. This particular girl had been exploited in a pretty horrific way. And for her now to be the one that was building a home and providing a better future for her family was incredible. And at that moment you think, it can't get any better than this. And then she went on to say that she was also able to buy her sister back from a man that owned her. And I've told that story so many times, but I can't help but feel the emotion of how desperate her sister must have felt, how desperate her mum and her dad and her siblings must have felt to know that somebody owned their family member, someone that they love more than anything, and there was nothing they could do about it because they were so poor. And unfortunately, that's the reality for millions of people around the world. And in fact, there's 40-odd million slaves in the world today. It's a bigger problem than it's ever been any other time in history. And we in our countries actually have the ability to solve this problem. And we can do it in a range of ways. So I'm hearing this story and I'm motivated to continue on, and you realize that this model really has something. But we knew that if we wanted to help thousands and ultimately millions of people one day, then we have to really solidify this model to be something so unique that has so much power in the transformation of somebody's life through serving them and offering them opportunities to succeed themselves, that we then, I guess, embarked on the next 9 years, which has led us to here. We launched our brand, Outland Denim, nearly 5 years ago now. And in that period of time, this was the first story I heard that was transformative. Since I've heard these other incredible stories. A 17-year-old girl who was only 14 when she was stolen with her friend out of Cambodia and sold into Malaysia. And for the next 3 years, she was a slave, literally a slave, making clothes in a garment factory. The cost of somebody who is enslaved today is only $90. So because it's so cheap to own a slave, it's better to replace them than it is to maintain them. So you know how your parents take their car to be serviced at the garage and it might cost them $200, $300, $400 every time they service it? Well, it's like not servicing it and just throwing the car away and buying a new one every time, because that's how cheap it is. So the price of a slave is probably worth less than what you're wearing on your body right now. And that's a really sad reality of today. This young girl was there with her friend. Her friend unfortunately died. Until eventually she was rescued by another amazing organisation called International Justice Mission, who repatriated her back into Cambodia, where she started working with us. She was able to come to a safe place where she was loved and supported and could learn the skills she needed to be successful and have a sustainable future, because she had these skills and could earn a good income. That's just two of the stories that aren't even the craziest of the stories. It's real and it's happening every single day. And in fact, it was only in the newspaper a week or so ago that there was 2 Australians convicted of having a slave in Brisbane.
Wow, so it's a pretty full-on story to think about. Here you are riding motorbikes to then seeing something and really God just revealing something to you that you just couldn't ignore. And it's now become your life mission to live this out. And so you've started a jeans company. How's that going? How has society, outside of even the 4 walls of the church, responded to this idea of like ethical shopping? Is it something that people like, nah, it's just for the Christians, or how's that all gone?
It's a big question. Don't know if you want the answer to it. People have responded really well. You know, people want to be a part of a solution. I think we all want to be a part of a solution. You know, we're looking for ways to be able to contribute and help in society. I would say the church really struggles to be a part of this solution, although we are, I guess our whole faith is about this. And I think it's a real wake up call for me as somebody, as a part of the church at whole, to go, it is really our responsibility to step up and to solve these social issues within not just our own country, but within the world that we live within. And how we do that, I think, can be a number of ways. But I think the first thing is that it's so important for us to realize that it is our problem. And often in countries like Australia, where we've got it really good, you know, it's hard to be down and out in Australia like it is in a place like Cambodia, where there isn't welfare and support systems, where you literally could die on the streets very easily. So because of that wealth and that privilege that comes with just living in this country, but probably for most of us in this room as well, probably from the families we come from and the great support that we've got to come to an amazing church and have the support of this church or school, means that we're the ones that have the ability to solve these issues. And so the response to the brand has been way more miraculous than I could have ever imagined, with large celebrities endorsing the brand organically, people just wanting to come in and buy the product and selling more, and launching the best stores in the world to sell our product as well. And so we've had this amazing run, and the reason for it is because I believe that this brand aligns with nearly every individual's values. So the challenge is, though, is to cut through in a busy world where we can slow down enough to think about the consequence of the decisions we make every day. So the clothing we wear, who made the clothing? I will guarantee slaves made probably the majority of the clothes in the room here. And I don't think there'd be one person in this room that would go, that's okay. But because we live in a society that built a system that was measuring the bottom line, meaning how much money does this brand or company make only, it meant that these other things have been ignored. And now it's about rebuilding society and rebuilding industry so that it actually aligns with the things that we all believe. And that is the mission of Outland Denim.
That's awesome. So, Jim, you're sitting here. Let's rewind just a couple of years, because you're only 21. So let's rewind 6 years ago. Let's think back. What would you be saying to yourself, to 15-year-old Jim, who's sitting here in this auditorium right now, as someone sort of comes up and shares this real success story, this real grassroots story of just responding to the calling that God has placed on your life? What would you say to someone in the room?
There's so many things that I'd say. But I think obedience is one of the greatest lessons I've learned. I think about God as my dad. I think about him as my father. And now that I have children of my own, it's much easier for me to understand my relationship with God as well. But I think about him as my dad, and I think about how would my dad have looked at me when I was 15, and I know it was always with love. I know he was always looking at me with love, even when I made mistakes. And so I say that because obedience takes a big step of faith a lot of the time. I believe I'm called to. I believe it's my responsibility to. But that next step is really, really hard, especially at 15. But I believe that the reward, and when I say reward, it mightn't mean what you might think it means, but the reward in taking that step of faith and being obedient to what you believe God has called you to do is the key to unlocking the greatest potential in your life, hands down, no matter what. Religious ideas and all those things, there's so much clutter in trying to work out your faith, but I just believe that if you understand God to be looking at you and loving you like your dad, and some people don't know what that's like because they may not have had a dad that loves them like that. I'm really lucky that I have. But a dad that loves you like that wants the absolute best for you. And so when you take those steps to try and please him, whether you get it right or wrong, is nearly beside the point. It's about obedience, going, I love you, Dad, and I want to make you proud. I want to do what I believe you're asking me to do. And so I think that will unlock a very different life if at 15 you can start to act like that and walk through your life with that kind of obedience.
That's awesome. That's a really good answer. I'm glad we recorded that. That's fantastic. So, Jim, I guess this is a huge problem This is like, you've laid some pretty heavy statistics on us, and it can seem quite confronting. And I guess sometimes, and even in my own life, I've been guilty of going, the problem's too big, what impact am I going to have? What response would you have back to that?
Yeah, I guess I'd ask this question. When you're walking down the street, and you notice that there's somebody that's homeless and they don't have anything. Whose responsibility do you think it is to solve that problem? I don't know. Does anybody have an opinion on that? Probably not game to call it out. That's okay. I ask a lot of people that question, and a lot of the time they say the government. It's the government's responsibility to make sure nobody's homeless. And I think that's where we go wrong a lot of the time, is thinking that it is somebody else's responsibility to solve this problem, no matter how big it is. There's a lot of homeless people. Slavery exists here in Australia. Slavery exists in every corner of the world. It's bigger today than it's ever been, but statistically, per capita, it's smaller. There's more people in the world today. And in fact, it's getting smaller, and actually it's so achievable for us to eradicate this, and my dream is that maybe I get to see that happen. Now, do I think that there's going to ever be free of exploitation of some kind in some way? No. I think that's always going to happen because of, the sinful nature of humankind. But I really believe that if the church, and when I say the church, I don't mean just this church building and the people that go into the church buildings. I mean those that believe that Jesus is the Son of God, those people. I believe that if those people really believe what the Word of God says, then they will take it upon themselves to solve this problem. And that might just be by handing $5 over to the person on the side of the street that needs a hand, helping them get a job, buying a new shirt for them, thinking about who made the clothes that you're wearing today. It's simple little things that when we all do it, if it was even just the church, we would eradicate this issue. Just the church.
Wow, that's full on. And honestly, guys, that's why every year we do in term 3, we do our social justice term, is because we realize that, sometimes we can be told, 15-year-old us, we can be told we actually can't have an impact. And even last week I was talking to a small group of boys, and they were like, well, what can I do? We actually we don't have any say, we don't really have any influence. And then even just in that small group, it's the grade 8 boys, I'll shout you out, we sat there and they're all like, we can actually all contribute a couple of dollars a month to actually go towards sponsoring a child. And so all of a sudden at the start of that small group, we sat there believing this lie that we can't have an impact. And then all of a sudden we realized, oh my gosh, we can actually start something here in this small group. And so that would be my encouragement to you is believe, exactly what Jim said, that God's actually put this calling, this burden on all of our hearts to actually go and help solve this problem. To find those people that society overlooks and say, that's someone else's problem or that's not my problem. No, God's put that on our heart. God's given us those eyes to see. And so I just say, the last thing I'd say is the reason we have these shirts is for us to make this statement. To actually say, no, we don't want to stand for the abuse of people. We don't want to stand for slave labor. We actually want to take a stance in society and say, hey, we believe that everyone is loved by God and that everyone deserves a good and fair shot in life. And so any way that we can partner with companies like Outland or Destiny Rescue or Byron, our missions partner from last week, we as a youth ministry are going to do all that we can to partake in that. But Jim, I just want to say a massive thank you for sharing, for opening up your heart. And my hope and my prayer is that we believe that we can really make a difference. This is one person's story of responding to that image that God gave them as they were praying before a freestyle motorcycle show. And now hundreds and hundreds of lives have been changed because of this man and responding to the calling that God's put in his life. Wouldn't it be amazing if this youth ministry was filled with stories like that? Do you have any final words, anything you'd like to say?
That shirt that you're wearing, because of one of those shirts, a cycle of freedom was activated because of that shirt. And it's hard for you to understand that, I think, because it seems so far out there. But I know these people, and I know many of their families, and I know that when they are given the opportunity to be a part of your life in this way, you, the person who buys it, activates that cycle, and that has a generational impact to where their children aren't going to be sold, because their children are going to be educated and cared for in a way that maybe their parents never got to experience because of severe poverty, because of slavery. And you hold the keys to that. And I don't want anybody to feel any kind of guilt around decisions that you've made before knowing. But I just want you to consider going forward, who are you and what do you stand for? Because you, just you, can change the world, absolutely, no question.